It's the SWP Disciple checking in. So I'm downtown Springfield. Just watched our fireworks, our 4th of July fireworks, which Springfield does a really good job with. Maybe I'll post a video later. I don't know, but you know that joke. They say people don't care about your fireworks video and photos, but y'all gonna learn today. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how I feel. So I listened to Lowe's kind of like analysis and video on the Jaylen Brown Celtics debacle. Now that I've kind of cooled off a little bit, and I might end up there in a little bit. It's still early enough, but I gotta get some food in me. I just realized that all I've had today was an apple. Yeah, now that I've cooled off a little bit, I see what the Celtics are trying to do. I mean, not that I didn't see it before. Somebody's like homegrown fireworks there. That's not our regular display. Of course, I'm driving by the Basketball Hall of Fame, the Naismith Memorial. The best of all the Hall of Fames, in my opinion. Yeah, so happy 250th America. Yeah, so there is a chance that we'll actually be better coming out of this. I don't know necessarily next season, unless there's like another move that they can make. Of course, the big deal is like we ostensibly traded Jaylen Brown for Paul George, right? So at this point of their careers, Jaylen Brown, no question, a better player. But Paul George may be a better fit. He's a better spot-up three-point shooter. Now, when you look at their percentages, it's not that far apart. But you have to kind of like, dig into the devil, in the details. A lot of Paul George's three-point shots, and I'm sure they parsed them, is a lot of like, tween, off the crack, pull up, which is obviously a much harder shot than just spotting out. JB had a few of those as well, but he gets a fair amount of like of open like range shots because people are like loading up in the paint, so he can't get to the rack. It's it's a lot of like eye test and like numbers that are within like the 5% margin, like almost within like the margin of error. But my eye does tell me that Paul George, just in general, is a better shooter. Yes, we do have not necessarily tent communities like California or in Texas, but yeah, we do have a homeless population here too under the bridges and stuff. And then the big thing is it's not a huge savings immediately. It's like maybe about $5 million per year, I believe. And not only that, I think there's like a trade kicker with usually it's like what, a 15% trade kicker or something like that, 10 or 15%. So substantial money. So I think it's going to end up being a push or even in terms of like 2027 and 2028 between the two of them. Now the thing with Paul George is that after 2027, 28. That the second year of the remaining 2 years of the contract, the Celtics are off the hook. And not only that, he'll be an expiring that a lot of teams are looking for. So he'll be very tradable really after this year. So it's really like a 1+1 contract, whereas with Jaylen Brown, they have the extra year, right? So it's 3 years. But then, they'd be pressured to do the 2-year extension, the 2 years, like 140-something million, so about 70 million. And therein lies the problem. So as much as I love JB and I wanted him to be a lifelong Celtic, and he reminds me of one of my favorite Celtics, D. Brown, because they both wore 7, the same last name. What are the odds? I don't know that he's worth 70 M's per year. Now, you're probably wondering, all right, so the Supermax is one thing. Could they have just come to the table and done something under that? I mean, after all, Jalen Brunson, he signed for less than he could have signed for. There's a few guys that did that. It's a trend that's pretty recent, but I'd say famously in terms of kicking it off was years ago with the Bobcats and Big Al Jefferson. He signed for less than the max. It was either with the Bobcats or even before that with Minnesota before he landed there. And I think he ended up having like an All-NBA third-team season. That might be the last All-NBA player that they've had in Charlotte Bobcats / Hornets. So it can happen. We just take for granted that whatever the player is eligible for, especially if they're in the Supermax level, which means that they had to have X number of like all-NBA or all-defensive teams, that they just have to take it. Famously, again, with Isaiah Thomas, lowercase Isaiah Thomas that we had when he had qualified for like All NBA second team. I think he was like 5th in the MVP, averaged like 29 points. It was like 28.9. And had just a great season, great season. And I believe that he could have continued something like that had he not injured his hip. But hip injuries to smaller players is like death, basically, so to speak. That happened with, I can't remember his name. He was drafted famously. He got a lot of famous in this, famous or infamy or whatever in this video. But damn, I can't remember his name. But he was drafted by Minnesota along with Ricky Rubio ahead of Steph Curry back in 2009. He was out of Syracuse. Why can't I remember his name? He was like really good too. I'm picturing him, but I can't remember his name right now. Was it Morrison? You know who I'm talking about. But he injured his hip, and he was gonna be good too. He was like undersized though, like 6 foot. Johnny Flynn, and I don't know where the Morrison came from. Johnny Flynn, and injured his hip, and then was pretty much shortly out of the league because as a small guy, you're dependent on your twitchies and your burst and even straight line speed, but mostly the twitchies and quick release and all that. Once the hip, which is like your main hinge along with your knees, you can't do it like you used to. So that happened to IT. And then the other thing about it, like when I stop and think about it, so I don't know if my Celtics, my beloved Celtics, are building just a bad reputation where they're just super cutthroat. Because what I thought of then, and it sprang to mind again today while I was walking in the park, since the gym was closed, is they could have just signed him, because it's happened before, whether it's like Embiid or any number of players, unfortunately on the same team with the 76ers. Damn, why can't I remember his name right now? All these names are escaping me. The Australian, I just can't remember anything right now. But you can sign players and have them sit out a season. Obviously it sucks. You think of even Blake Griffin. He sat out his rookie season. That was his rookie contract though. But you can sign guys knowing that they're going to have to sit out a season, and that's fine because the total value over time is going to be worth it. Ben Simmons is who I was thinking of. It's going to be worth it. So they could have done that with IT, have him set out a season, 2 seasons, and I think he was eligible for like 130 or 140, 150, whatever the Supermax was at the time. I think the max at the time was was 150, because that was right at the time when the all that TV money came rolling in. And I think 150, it was like 30 a year for 5 years. So I'm sure he would have taken, had you negotiated properly and in good faith, taken like a 5-100 or something like that, which I'm sure they're looking at it like, oh, we're not trying to pay him 20 a year with this like damaged goods or whatever. And of course on the front end, you figure you have like a willing Kyrie Irving coming in, not realizing that he was going to like torpedo the team and be bad juju or whatever. But that's where having like foresight, and anyone who's like threatening the previous team to have surgery so as to like sit out or whatever, you can't believe that that's going to end well for you. Years ago, Shaq did that with the Lakers, where he's like, I got injured on company time, so I'm going to heal on company time. There's no way you can think that that's going to end up, that's going to end up the right way. It's kind of like, you lose them the way that you get them. So anyway, I don't know if we're building a reputation of like just not the place to sign. Boston really never gets big free agent signings anyway. Usually it's like a B, or at best like a B plus type player, like a Gordon Hayward or Al Jefferson, not Al Jefferson, but Al Horford type of player. So maybe they're just like, F it, we don't get the tier 1 guys anyway, so we're not going to, just for the sake of reputation, start paying guys what they're not worth or whatever. It's hard to say. I'm just kind of like running over everything. Far be it for me to have a polemic against my my hometown team, whatever, my childhood team, but it's not a good look. But in the long term, I see what they're not going to really save any money up front. Basically, this is about the picks and not having to extend Jaylen Brown. So basically, you have some pain for at minimum the next year. We'll see what happens with Paul George and the expiring. But yeah, it sucks, but I can definitely see Paul George, because remember, he only played 37 games last year, but he had to sit out 25 games due to like PED suspension. So maybe, I don't see him playing. Nobody plays 82 games, but I don't see him playing 70 games. But maybe we can get like 60, 65 out of him. Maybe he'll be motivated to get another contract. For all we know, maybe he opts out of that last year, call it $60 million, and actually wants to, like, maybe we do like a sign and trade or something like that, or hell, maybe he wants to stay. I don't see any way that like opting out and the extension makes sense, where say he does like kind of like what Wiggins did down in Miami, does like say like a 3-year $90 million or something like that, so we're off the hook for the $60 million, but we pay him $30 per year. At that point, even if he has a good season, he might be better served just like taking that last year and then playing free agency after that. But that is on the table, like like a 3-year 90. I think that returns good value for both, where he gets the extra $30 million right on top of the 60, and then we get 3 years of like a really good, like near all-star player at only, these numbers sound crazy, like $30 million a season, but say he puts up like a close to 20 points a game, 5-and-5 type season with really good defense. Ironically, the reason why he's even on the radar is because he was healthy for the playoffs, which might have been aided by him only playing 37 games in the regular season, and again, ironically, because he played really good defense on Jaylen Brown. So they're like, we kind of have the 3-and-D foil right here. Might as well trade for him, you know what I mean? So, people are very much like, what have you done for me lately? So if he gets off to a really good start, which is totally on the table for him, and he averages like 25-and-5, good shooting splits. He was never like a high efficiency guy in terms of raw numbers. His efficiency usually comes from the fact that he shoots a lot of threes. So his EFG, his effective field goal percentage, reflects a lot better than his raw shooting percentage. He's like a 44% from the field type of guy, but then his EFG is like 52% or so, 53%. So he's kind of like from the James Harden school of efficiency, where it's not, you got to look at the second level efficiency and not just the raw efficiency. So I can see people shutting up. Remember when we traded for Kyrie and everyone like was in uproar, including myself, and then we got off, I think, to like a 16-1, 16-2 start that season. I think until the injuries, and I think we finished winning like 48 games, but that was just because of like injury down the road. I think that, if I remember correctly, like obviously the Gordon Hayward the first game, but 16-2 was like a really good start, and then we kind of tapered off. But it was very clear talent-wise that we were like one of the better teams in the league that season and the next season, until the playoffs we kind of torpedoed for other reasons. But Jaylen Brown, so this is a great example of life isn't necessarily about what happens to you, but about how you react. Because like once the dust settles, I fear, and I say this, obviously I'm a Celtics fan, but like from the Jaylen Brown perspective, we can still win like 60 games. That Mitchell Robinson signing is sneaky good, if for no other reason than we kind of weakened the Knicks. I know that they just signed what's his name, from UConn, big, really good, Andre Drummond, as the backup. So he might do a pretty good job. I still feel like as a vertical spacer, Mitchell Robinson's a little better. He's a little younger, a little more livelier in terms of movement. You don't think of movement for a big man unless they're like a stretch five, which a stretch five is like a pie in the sky, and that doesn't apply to either of them anyway. But I feel like Mitchell Robinson's a better diving, like towards the basket and moving from block to block. Plus, he's a better defender than Drummond. I feel like Drummond's probably better overall offensively, but it's not like they're going to feature him. He's going to be a backup anyway, so that's kind of like a moot point. But their thinking is they kind of weaken the Knicks, and then now we have a big boy to bang with, like Embiid. When Cat comes to town. I'm trying to think of any other. If we are lucky enough to make it to the finals, somebody to, there's already proof of concept in, with like a big five that can bang with Wemby. And if OKC makes it, they don't have iHeart anymore, but they have. I can't remember his name. I can't remember anybody's name right now because there's just too many damn names. floating around in my head, but you know who I'm talking about. They're 4-5 who similarly might be on the block because I think he already has his Abraham Lincoln looking cat. He already has his max extension, but I can see OKC getting rid of him if he's plateaued, which it appears he may have, even though he's still young. He's 24. So Chet Holmgren. So we'll see, because he has all the talent to. I don't see him being a big time rebounder, but he should get to like the 20 and 8 with like 2.5, 3 blocks. But he's been kind of stuck in like the 16 to 18, like 8 blocks, 8 rebounds, 2 blocks. But a lot of it's like off of action from SGA and J-Dub, who himself has been injured lately. So, but of course they're very deep. They're like 8 deep, but it's a lot of small guys. So they really need Chet Holmgren to step up, because he's the one big guy that can kind of break the game for him. So I see what the Celtics are doing. There's a chance that they could be better. And not only that, the Jaylen Brown fit on the 76ers could be janky. It could also be good. Jaylen Brown does have some off-ball chops, but he's definitely better with the ball in his hand. We'll see. He's not quite a finished product at 29, but he is like in his prime now, so there isn't much more ceiling to go. Love JB, love what he did for the Celtics. They're low-key blaming the Celtics not winning more titles on him is what this really is. I always knew that 2022 would come back to haunt us, because this would be much harder to do if we won in 2022 and then 2024. And then, of course, there's a couple that we left on the table because Jason Tatum's been injured, but for whatever reason, they just really believe in him. And there's always a team that just has a golden boy. And when I say team, I don't even necessarily mean sports. Whatever you do, I've seen it like in corporate America, where I'm like, I know the inside baseball. I'm like, damn, this cat is kind of a good worker, but takes a lot of PTO or comes in late. And, there's always something that's like not all the way there. But for whatever reason, this cat's just like touched by an angel, and they just love him. I've seen it at work. I've seen it with cats where they were just never all like straight aces on everything. I know cats who were like pretty good worker, but took like hella cigarette breaks, or was like an okay worker, but was just like really well liked, or was like a really good worker, but took a lot of PTO and actually ran over on PTO, but management would disguise it for him and just not report it. Like everything, it was never like great worker, came in early, was always ahead of the ball on PTO, didn't take excessive breaks, everybody liked him. Like, that kind of thing doesn't really exist. And maybe it shouldn't, you know what I mean? Especially when you're just like a regular working schmuck making like regular money. But like, I'm just saying, like, you look at Tatum, he doesn't shrink in the playoffs, but like isn't quite as good in the playoffs. And of course, we all know why. The defenses are better. There's a focused scouting report. There's not the 10 teams that are tanking after the All-Star break or whatever. So you're just playing like all focused teams that are trying to advance for the most part. It's sneakily not that great for mid-range, even though it looks like it. Like, it's kind of like almost like a Kobe Bryant syndrome. As we know, he models his game after Kobe Bryant. Kobe was a bit better from mid-range, though he took too many. The same thing with JT. Probably takes too many, but isn't really that accurate. Takes a lot of off the dribble, like deep threes, and is sneakily just kind of all right from 3. I think what they like from him is like he still has upside at 28. We'll see how the Achilles affects that. Has the big frame where he'll age well as he gets older, because he can just become a power forward as he gets older. Is already a really good rebounder, is already a really good defender, good help defender, which is like more important than on the ball, but he's a good on the ball defender as well. Has good scoring rates, pretty good passer, not as good, like you can tell there's like an alternate reality somewhere where he passes about as well or approaching LeBron James, but he's not there. He can see over the defense, he has like the big frame, he has pretty good vision, turns the ball over too much when pressed, but we can see that being like coached out of his game over time. He's becoming a better and better ball handler, but he's not there yet. All these things I'm saying as in comparison to Jaylen Brown, right? Jaylen Brown's more of I was talking to somebody, he's basically the modern Dominique Wilkins. Now, I think Dominique is incrementally better, like the impact stats and analytics seem to say that he's better, but not by a lot. Like, if you can remember, I mean, obviously I'm starting to get a bit older than everyone, right? So I can still remember, like, Atlanta Hawks, Dominique Wilkins. He was viewed very much the same way, where his peers loved him, but, you know, basketball players, like, people while they're in the moment playing, are notoriously bad scouts and analysts of talent. They just kind of know what they know, and they're susceptible to a lot of the eye test stuff that, like, your layman fan is. But a lot of front offices weren't really a big fan. That's why he was left off of the 50th anniversary team. And, you know, if you look at their box stats, like, Dominique Wilkins is somewhat better, but I think a lot of that's just usage, because he was like a bona fide number one. Like, you weren't going to put like Doc Rivers or Kevin Willis ahead of him, or anything, or Tree Rollins or anything like that. He was like a bona fide number one, whereas Jaylen Brown's always been kind of like at loggerheads as the 1B. So if you crank up his like this season, you crank up his usage, and it looks pretty much like Dominique Wilkins. Now, at their apex, I think Dominique Wilkins is like slightly better, just because he's a better athlete and he was 6'8" and not 6'6". But, you know, Jaylen Brown's is a fine athlete. He's one of the best athletes in the league. Just not quite the upper end like Dominique Wilkins, but he's a better shooter. Ironically, probably a better ball handler. Not probably, he is a better ball handler, even though people complain about his left hand. Finishing at the basket, of course, you know, finishing at the basket only goes back to like 1997, so it would have been like basically after Dominique Wilkins' entire career, certainly after his Hawks career. But they're the same player, both in how they're viewed and their stats. You know, the counting numbers are going to favor Dominique Wilkins just because of usage. Like, you know, he averaged like 22 shots a game for his whole career, which is not going to be the case for Jaylen Brown. But yeah, we'll see how this plays out. All the best to Jaylen Brown. I think the analytics definitely got him in this one, and then also the fact that he was a couple things, right? So they look to be at least as good when he's not on the floor, and he's missed enough games for them to kind of have like a good analysis. But then in a lot of games where he was there, you know, he was there with JT, and he was never the bona fide like 1A. So it's like his ceiling was lowered in a lot of ways, and then how much of it is like his battery being drained by taking the toughest defensive assignment, you know, a la the 2024 NBA Finals. But anyway, I'm rambling. So in like a very tight retrospective, right, because it just happened, it does appear that the Celtics did the right thing, even though they didn't do right by Jaylen Brown. You know, both can be true. So anyway, the Lord is faithful. Stay with me. God bless.